Is started. You can go ahead, Dan.
Okay, well, thank you, Nalini. Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to what seems like the big look ahead. Here it is, March 1st, 2022, and we're already here tonight talking about 2023 in our budgets, but that's all part of looking ahead. So thank you for your time tonight. On behalf of Erie County and the County Executive, Mark Polenkars, I'd like to thank you for your time and interest in this program, but I'd also like to thank you for all the arts and cultural programming that you guys deliver now and have been delivering. You know, we're coming out of a long pandemic period. I don't need to tell anyone about that. But what's really exciting is that we get an opportunity to help fund your groups. We've seen most all of you make it through the pandemic, and that's a terrific thing. And this is a really important program for the county to continue helping the arts and cultural community. It's so important to the quality of life of everyone in Erie County that the arts and cultural community is as healthy as possible. So thank you for that. Just a real quick note before we get into 2023. For those, tonight is the call for folks, for organizations that are ongoing and have had this funding in the past. I just want to let you know that we are in the process of getting out your contracts for 2022. Some of you may have seen them already, but we are in the process of doing that. Have some patience over the next few weeks. We're trying to process 106 of these, so it'll take a little bit of time, but they're moving ahead. So with that, I want to start focusing forward, and tonight's the beginning of that process. And you'll hear tonight from Connie Campanaro, the chair of the Erie Arts and Cultural Advisory Board. You heard from Edie Ortiz as a walkthrough on the application. Not a lot's changed, but you'll see some changes. But one thing I also want to introduce our new Deputy Commissioner of Planning, Thomas Baines. That you'll see on the screen as well. Thomas joined recently. I'm really excited. We're all excited to have Thomas on board, not only as a planner and someone experienced in the development community, but also someone that has a background in the arts and cultural programs as well. So we're thrilled to have him on board. One thing I do want to stress before we get into the process of the application is, it's easy to fall into this sense that Erie County is just funding your programming, and we do want to fund that programming. But what we really want to do is help you be stronger, more resilient organizations. And a lot of the feedback that our committee provides is with the understanding to help make your organization stronger and more resilient, more diverse, and really help to deliver even stronger programming going forward. So again, we'll go through a little bit of a presentation tonight. I'll turn it over to Connie. I think we can go to the next slide. I'll turn it over to Connie here. Actually, before I do, let me just mention that, this is Erie County is one of the few counties in the state, probably the only county outside New York City that is funding arts and cultural program. We're very proud of that. Our program has been recognized by the National Association of Counties as a type of program that other counties should mirror and follow. So that's really a great testament to the types of program and the commitment the county has. So with that, I will turn it over to Connie to begin the more official part of the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Daniel. My name is Connie Campanaro. This is my first year as chair, and I've just entered into my 4th year on the advisory board. I want to thank all of you for being here. I know that it's not a real convenient, hour and a half or 2 hours of your time, so I appreciate very much that you're here, the board members that are here, and the DEP staff that are here tonight. Thank you all for being here. And one thing I like about this slide about the award that Erie County received for this program is it reminds me that your grant maker is also being evaluated by their peers. So it's safe to say we're all being evaluated, right? I have most of my lifetime has been behind the scenes as an arts administrator. I do know what it feels like to be a grant seeker and to be a grant maker. And I also know what it's like to really depend on that revenue to be able to make ends meet, be able to keep the doors open or the virtuals open, and be able to keep your staff and be able to develop your audiences. And we are here to try to make our program better. And as Daniel said, we're also here to try to help keep the sector strong. We're extremely proud of Erie County's cultural sector, as I'm sure all of you are. Thanks, Marilee. Next slide. At the top of the hour, we do want to remind you that Art Services is here to help you. They exist to make our arts and cultural sector stronger and to help make our artists stronger and to help you find funding and to help you do well on your grant applications, as well as help you to build capacity. So I invite you to reach out to Art Services if you do have further questions or if you feel like you need some one-on-one help. Just don't wait till the last minute. It's really important that we pace ourselves. And just want to remind you, Art Services is probably your biggest fan, and they're here to help you. So this is a summary of the current year. So it would have been a year ago that we were having these virtual training sessions talking about what seemed to be far off in the future. Well, this is the grant money that is being executed now. There were 106 different grant awards, almost $7.5 million in funding. The average amount of funding was $70,000. The medium, meaning there were as many above as there were below in terms of the amounts. The median is your $10,000 number. And the most frequently occurring grant amount was $3,000. So that's what it looks like as of this last year. So the funding cycle, we're showing you this maybe to help you appreciate why we're having this training session tonight when it seems like the whole thing is so far away. So we're releasing the application usually in February. It was released February 22, all online. Then we schedule these briefings. This year we decided to keep it, have two different briefings, one for the more experienced applicant and one for the applicants that are brand new to the process. So tonight obviously is for many very well-versed organizations. So you create your account. I'm sure you already have created your account. And the first thing that we do, the board and the staff, is we check to make sure all the parts and pieces are attached. You have various attachments depending on what level of grant funding that you seek. And we want to make sure that all the attachments are there and all the questions are answered. So the first thing we do is we do some housekeeping to make sure all the parts and pieces are there. At that point, then we do distribute different assignments to board members and to staff. The board members will form teams so that they can help advise each other and to help us with the understanding of what the various terms are and the various objective grading points as well. When we feel that the whole process is complete, once we've had a chance to ask any questions of any of the applicants and get additional information that we might feel was missing from the application, once everyone has completed their evaluations and the groups have completed their discussions, we get back together again to discuss the applications and to discuss the general process. Each year we have suggestions of how we can make this process better. So don't be shy about sharing with us any ideas that you have as well, because it really helps. So the different perspectives of how the process could be better is always important to us. And so we do probe, find out what staff and board thought about the process, maybe what was the most misunderstood question, and then we try to make it better in the following years. So after that, there's a lot of technical statistics and evaluations and scoring points, but there is a mathematical spreadsheet that is worked out to help redefine what does all this mean. There's over 100 applications, and then we go into an analysis of how much money that might be. Obviously, we don't even know yet what the total pot of money is going to be, but we base it on a guesstimate based on the previous year's funding. And then at some point, the DEP staff has to let go of our best recommendations after we've studied them, and they are turned over to the county executive. Now, he'll evaluate our recommendations and he'll weigh them on his own in accordance with the funds that are available for the county that year and other priorities. I think at this point is also a good time to celebrate the fact that even though one of his other burning priorities would have been the COVID-19 pandemic, he and the legislature still did proceed with funding even in the middle of a pandemic. So that's just one example of him weighing all the other priorities before making a final determination on the funding. So as you can see from the graph, it is a lengthy process. And then once the budget is approved and the various grant amounts have been approved and the budget is adopted, that at that time we're able to issue our contracts and our checks back to you, which hopefully you're receiving now for 2022. Thank you. Our board, we have about 40% of our board are new members, but I'm really proud of the board we have. We have nonprofit professionals, we have grant-making professionals, CEOs, CPAs, attorneys, data analysts, consultants. It's just a really great variety of perspectives, and we value every one of them. The different perspectives, the different past experiences that they bring to the table really helps to make this a great team. Obviously, you can say the same for the staff. Really great team, far more experienced than we are, but also great perspectives. So I think we're looking at over 20 people that are helping in this process. Each and every application does get a good deal of attention. I do want to assure you of that. There is no skimming over. There is no, well, let's just jump to the end. Every single one of your applications is evaluated, and we do take a good deal amount of time with each and every one. Thank you. And thank you all, the board members that are in attendance tonight. Thank you for your service. So this is where we like to make the analogy about an annual checkup. So when you go to an annual checkup to your doctor, and I know you've heard this before, ever since some of the bigger changes were made in how we do the process, we like to equate it to an annual checkup in the sense that once you have completed this grant process and you have taken a look at your governance documents, at your management and planning, your fiscal health, how you're managing your finances, you come out of this with the strength to be able to apply for any grant. And I truly believe that. You're getting all of your ducks in a row. There are checklists that you're looking at as well. Do my bylaws have this? Do they have that? And you're telling us which page we can find these items on. And in so doing, you're actually giving yourself a little bit of a physical too. So we look at all of these elements of your nonprofit instead of sitting around and deciding whether or not we like your art. That's not what we're going to do. We feel that the art is subjective, and we maintain our pride in the sector, but we do not evaluate the art. We don't evaluate the cultural value of what you're presenting, producing, exhibiting. We just want to help make the nonprofit itself as strong as it can be, so that you can continue to play a critical role in our community and continue to be relevant and important as a benefit to our county. Thank you. one of the things I like to mention with this slide is you could have a really compelling mission and a really great management plan, a really great strategic plan, a really great vision, and you could wow an evaluator with this, but they're still going to have to sit down and look at your governance and your financial health. And each and every area, we're assigning a number to it. We're assigning a grade to it. Again, we're trying to make it objective so that it's not subjective. And so my point is that every component is important. If you have a stellar, exceptional, best as it could be financial management, but you're limping along in the other areas, then your overall score isn't going to be as good as it could be. So I do encourage you to think about every single component of your grant application and anything else that would impact your evaluation. If your grant is late, I mean, we look the other way in the throes of the pandemic, but if your grant is late, then there are it's a deduction from your score. If you're unable to respond to the question of whether or not you acknowledged Erie County support, whether or not you acknowledged our past suggestions for how you could make for a stronger application in the future, those things do count against you. And then there are deductions in your final score. So every single component, every section of the application, every single attachment is really important. Some of them, for a lot of us, are maybe a little boring compared to the mission statement and your description of your programs, but every single one is weighted almost exactly the same. Thank you. We got together, Marilee and I, and combed over some of the past evaluation sheets, as well as some of the past constructive comments that have been made to grant seekers to come up with this short list. It could have been a lot longer, but we thought you might find this interesting and juicy, if nothing else. But some of the things that we want to see, that you should be aware we want to see, is that there are maximum consecutive term limits on board appointments. If your bylaws say that there are 2 5-year terms, but half of your board has been on the board for 20 years, then clearly you're not abiding by your own bylaws. Each evaluator has access to past evaluations. We can see who was on the board 6 years ago, and it's pretty clear if the term limits aren't being honored, or if they exist at all in the bylaws in the first place. Don't be repetitive. If there's a question on the application and you don't have much to say, then you can either say NA or you could say very little. But if you cut and paste answers from previous questions because you feel like you need to fill the space, it is not helpful at all. So don't feel like you need to fill the space just for the sake of saying something. Stick to the answer appropriate to the question. When you're so passionate about your work, it is easy to get caught up in wanting to say so much more. Most of the time, those other things you want to say will be asked later in the application. But stick to the question stick to the answer that is appropriate to the question being asked, and only the question being asked. Your work plan. When we ask you for your work plan, there's a note that says, help us to appreciate how you might spend this money. And then we say, it can be spent on personnel and rent and programs, but it can't be spent on capital improvements or past debt. But when we ask you this question for your work plan, how are you going to spend the money? We don't necessarily want you to say, just regurgitate back with the instructions where we will spend it on payroll and rent and we won't spend it on capital. We're really wanting you to help us to vision what is your 2023 going to look like. what is this grant support? So help us to really get there with you and see what is happening in 2023 based on your best planning. Obviously, it's a ways off. But if you got this money and you were funded to the degree you need to be, this is what we're envisioning for 2023. Help us see how the money is going to be spent in a way that's exciting. I would just encourage you to do that. Legible documents. When you attach a document, make sure it's a legible document. We have received submissions where there's an attachment, but once you open it and try to read it, you can barely make out the words because it's been copied generation after generation or whatever reason, or there was a flaw in the scanning process. But make sure it's a legible document. If it's not a legible document, it'll count as though you hadn't attached it in the first place. We also encourage you to include your most recent document. So if we're asking you for a copy, for example, of your tax filing for your most recently completed fiscal year, then we would want to see the same document that the IRS received. So it's going to have the signature on it by, the authority for your nonprofit. It might have the name of your CPA on it, whatever, but it really is the version that went to the IRS. That's what we're asking for. And we're asking for the most recent document. So if, your 2018 is handy on your laptop, that's not a good reason to attach it. Make sure it's the most recent version. We would like to make sure that you submit your final governance documents, your final conflict of interest documents, whatever these attachments are. If the document itself is a work in progress, you could tell us about that later in the application process. You can show us your drafts if that's what you'd like to do. But when we ask you to submit your bylaws, make sure they are your active bylaws that have been approved and accepted by the board. Your policies are the ones that are in use on the day that you hit send on the grant proposal. Make sure that they are the ones that you're adhering to today, not what you might like them to look like later in the year. We do like to see proactive diversification of board members, staff, and audience served. We feel that one of the most overlooked obstacles to achieving sustainability is not addressing how well or how poorly the board and the executive team represent the populations they serve. And as Erie County representative, we're saying Erie County when we say population. So feel free to educate yourself more if you want to with regard to the population profile of Erie County, but we do encourage you to try to mirror this community in your decisions of who's on the board and who's on the executive staff. And making sure that there is actual succession planning of when someone's terming off the board or terming off the leadership team or management team. That's also a great way to open up opportunities to diversify. So when you don't have any changeover, then you're closing yourself off from that opportunity to diversify. Funding diversification and continuous development of revenue sources. We do, like any funder, we do like to see that you are continuously looking for ways to strengthen and grow and serve your communities, and diversifying your revenue sources, your revenue streams, and not necessarily relying on the Erie County grant, but like any funder, we want to see what if this grant didn't happen, would you still thrive? So show us that you would still thrive because you have a surplus, or you have these other sources of funding, or you've developed these other sources and you've built relations with other funders. We like to see that. It doesn't reflect poorly on you at all. We like to see that that you're working hard to develop those areas. Next. some of the changes, these are minor changes. For those of you that have been asking for, or have been partnering with us for years, you know that we can look back on just 5 years ago and recognize that the process of applying for money has dramatically changed with the application being online now. Well, that's not all. You can now begin your application, upload attachments, go have a sandwich, sleep on it, come back 2 days later. So you have the ability to pace yourself, which is something that you have been able to do with NISCA and other grant makers, but hadn't been able to do with Erie County for a while there. And it made it a little, well, probably a little bit more stressful than some of the other grant applications. So you can do that now, and if you're an existing grant seeker and you've already uploaded certain things, those things I believe might still be there, like the vault for New York State. So if you haven't changed your bylaws, they're already there. But anyway, that I think is it's proof that we're in 2022 now. We are no longer looking at pre-pandemic fiscal year for you to decide which level you're applying for and how much you're applying for. We're back to looking at what was your last completed fiscal year and what was that budget. Now, based on that budget, what percentage, what's 20% of that budget? How much money are you requesting from Erie County, and so on. We are asking you about how you used your last Erie County grant. It's very brief. Just give us an overview of how the money was used. How was the money helpful to you? Show us acknowledgement examples, samples. And most of you do that. You're going to take a snapshot of Erie County's logo on your website or the logo on your brochure, wherever you're acknowledging Erie County. We have added an additional staff and board diversity question. It's really more of a blank. If you have other comments about diversity, insert here. So the reason for that is we have taken up a page to guess at all the different kinds of diversity you might have on your board and staff, but what if we left something out? And I know we do. There's only so much you can cover in a page. So if there are additional comments that you want to make about the diversity that you do have that hasn't been listed above on the application form, there's your area to do it. We've added a question about when you filed your Char 500. What is the date of your most recently submitted Char 500? Obviously, knowing that that New York State filing is what enables you to keep your license to solicit charitable donations from government, corporations or individuals. It's what helps you to keep that valid license. And so we are interested in making sure that you are filing that. Most organizations do that at the same time, but they do their tax filing. So chances are you're all good with that. Next slide. So recap on how you choose level 1, 2, or 3. You're not wed to the same level you did last year if things have changed. So we're showing you this again. So if your organization has a budget of up to $250,000, then you would be a level 1 and you could ask for as much as 50. If your organization is less than $250,000 a year, then you would ask for less, but you would still be a level 1. So level 2 applies to those 750,000 or up. This is very much like the accountant review versus audit that we're required to do based on budget. So this is where you would decide which one you're applying for and which level you're applying for and how much you're applying for. If you're not required to apply for a level 2 only because you're a $1 million organization. If you want to apply for level 1 because you feel like it's simpler and you're not going to ask for more than 50,000 anyway, then that's what you should pursue. Any organization can complete and submit a lower level application, as long as that percentage of last year's budget still applies and is accurate. If you make a mistake on that, we will come back and remind you that we're adjusting it according to last year's budget. I'm starting to lose my voice. Okay, so for the next slide. Eligibility, most of you already know. Located and provide services in Erie County. We want to see how you are serving the citizens of Erie County. Obviously, it's great if you're attracting audiences from all over the world, but we really want to see that you're providing services in Erie County. This is Erie County funding. So programs that are happening outside of Erie County, I wouldn't go out of my way to play those up because we care about what's happening in Erie County. You're a 501c3 organization for at least a year before filing, and we are going to be asking for your submitted tax filing. One of the following definitions of cultural organization. This might seem like it's an obvious thing, but if your organization is a religious or a scientific or prevention of cruelty to animals or human services organization, but you have this robust cultural program that helps to support your mission, that does not make you an arts and cultural nonprofit. That's not to say you don't deserve funding for what you do. It would just not come out of this particular pot. We want to keep the process pure in that the money is for arts and cultural organizations. Are you exhibiting, presenting, producing? Are you risking your organization's funds? Is it your organization's money that is at risk with this series or this project or this exhibit? That you own what it is you're doing. That's why you need the funding. It seems to make sense, but there are times when an application can get into the process and even almost through the process before we realize, oh, wait a minute. One of the examples I like to give, and this didn't happen, I just like to use the example, is the International Institute, you're probably well aware, has a lot of great cultural programming that doesn't make them a cultural nonprofit. So we encourage you to make sure your organization is first and foremost serving in one of these, or can prove one of these bulleted areas. And I'll take the opportunity to say that if your organization happens to own and maintain a beautiful building, but isn't really producing, presenting, exhibiting, running your own programs inside that building, that really doesn't fit either. We want to see that you are an active participant, that you are a risk taker in pursuit of your mission to produce and present art and culture. I hope that's clear. If there's any questions about that, we can get to that later too. Thank you. This is tough to read. So this is a quick recap of the attachments. Level 1 is by far the most, probably the most popular level, followed by 2 and 3. So depending on how big your organization is and how much funding you're requesting, it gets more complicated, which seems only fair. So again, we're talking about you attaching your, or acknowledging that you did thank the county in some way, shape, or form. Depending on the level, you might be asked to show an example of that. You're going to be attaching your financial report, your annual budget. You will be attaching an audit, perhaps. Everyone is asked to fill out a financial worksheet. We supply the worksheet. Everyone is asked to attach your tax filing, your bylaws, your conflict of interest policy, and disclosure forms that have been signed in the most current circulation of signings of board members or proposed board members. But whatever that freshest document is of the conflict of interest, that is what you would send. And a whistleblower policy. And for a lot of our applicants, that's a bit of a surprise because New York State does not require it unless you are so big that you have, I believe it's 50 or more employees, a million or more in revenue. But we require the whistleblower policy no matter if you have 2 people on staff or no people on staff, and it's all volunteer run. It is a Erie County best practices requirement. And we don't want to burden you necessarily. Marilee has right on the application form, there's a link to a form which you can create into your own whistleblower policy. And the great thing about that is, you know, it already has all of the elements that the evaluators are looking for. So don't try to create a whistleblower policy when you don't have to try to create a whistleblower policy when it's already been, the template is already being provided for you. There's also a template for a conflict of interest policy. If you are interested in seeing either of those, they're available on the website. Applicable to all levels. Okay, we sort of already covered this. So we're saying that how you can spend the money, that shows up on your contract when you receive the grant. How you can spend the money, we don't want to see that it's been spent on capital improvements, on purchasing a building or a down payment on a building, or that it's being used to pay off old debt. We do want to make sure that it's supporting what's going on with your nonprofit in 2023. And your opportunity to tell us more about that is in your work plan. And of course, we do have to say that funding requests are not guaranteed. I think that we are, Erie County as a funder, we are walking the walk and talking the talk, and our patterns seem to show that we do have your best interests at heart, but we do have to say that no funding requests are guaranteed. Application attachments. I think we've talked about these a lot, and I'm losing my voice. But so these are some examples of okay, we covered this.
Yep, I can take over if you like.
Yeah. Different ways you can acknowledge Erie County.
Yep. I think, folks, if you have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat. I will. I believe we covered pretty much all of this, and the next step is really to show you where to find the templates and go into the demo.
Mm-hmm. The 2 other things I want to mention is that,
Yes.
and I neglected to, is that the second half of tonight's training is a live demo with Marilee, and that Marilee is your sole contact, like with other grant makers that you liaise with, either private foundations or government foundations or government funding. You have one contact, and even though we have introduced so many folks here tonight, your contact is Marilee, and you are definitely in very good hands. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I am going to create a new window so we can walk through the presentation. So I want to show you, I've done an incognito window. I've done this specifically because if you're having issues logging in, usually it's an issue with your website or your browser history and cookies and stuff like that. If you can't log in, I recommend an incognito window. Usually it's you can right click your browser button and that'll be an option to make a new window. So we will go to erie.gov/cultural. And as usual, you folks have seen this before. First thing, you just want to go ahead and log in. Let's see if I remember the password. And I just inputted it last night. Yep. That's kind of what your account looks like. You don't need to edit anything unless you're changing your password for whatever reason. Remember, you only have one account per organization, so please do not request another account. If you can't log in for whatever reason, you can always email me or call me. My contact info will be at the end of the presentation. Once you've logged in, you can click on application, and here is the instructions. These same instructions are also on the page itself in the application, but before I go into that, I want to scroll down. This year, due to popular demand, we have the questions as a separate file that you can download and work on off the website, and then come back in and put them in there if you like. There's some questions that are kind of will not show up given your answer, like there'll be a yes, no question before the narrative portion of it. So just keep an eye on that so you don't end up filling up a lot of information that you actually don't need to do. Directions on the website if you're having issues with that. And here is the same table that we showed you, kind of lists all the attachments per level. And I'll come back to that in a second. And then here is more information per document. This hasn't changed from a couple years at this point. And a reminder of how to label your files, which is also in the application. And yes, you have the links to the different templates. Already downloaded them yesterday. So for example, the level 1 financial worksheet, the cash flow forecast. Oh, they open in a different window or a different screen. 1 second. There you go. The cash flow forecast, it looks like this. If you find that to be a little intimidating, you want something simpler, just make sure that your cash flow forecast includes these items I have highlighted on the screen.
By the same token, if you already have a cash flow forecast, because that's
Right.
what you're presenting to your board every month, you don't have to fill out this form. This form is intended to help those that don't routinely do cash flow as a convenience. We provided the form.
Now, a lot of your reports will have something that says statement of cash flows or something like that. It's not the same document necessarily. Make sure that the document you're attaching has this information. And then, of course, yours is much more complicated. Let me do a level 3. We'll just download it live for informational purposes. I don't actually own Excel, so there we go. If you also don't own Excel, just contact me and we'll see about getting you a version of this that doesn't require Excel. But this is, if you don't have it yet for whatever reason, or you need to update it, you can download your own file and update it, or you can do a new one if that'll be easier for you. And it has all of the different items. This actually has not changed from last year at all. Just want to make sure we are covering all the different aspects. Yes, under the resources tab, you can click like I clicked, or you can click on the top bar of the website. Here's the templates. If we keep giving you feedback on your governance documents and you never seem to get it right, maybe consider starting with one of these templates instead. Cash flow forecast is here as well. And I want to mention that these templates, we took some of the items from organizations that had really good ones, but for the most part, it comes from the law itself requirements. For example, conflict of interest policy must have these provisions at a minimum. That's copy pasted from the Nonprofit Corporation Act or law sections of
New York
the
State nonprofit law.
Yep. And we've copy pasted those sections onto the website so that it's a little easier to read instead of, the way it's on online, that is kind of all a run-on sentence looking. And there's different items that you can review and update your items. Here is where there will be this is the PDF from last night, which is very similar to this. And the recording is actually on the county YouTube page now. I need to update this link. And that's where you can find them. This was the registration, which I'll be changing. And last year's are right here, linked right here as well, if you wanted to go through that. although you don't need to, because I'll put tonight's up on the website tomorrow. All right, so into the actual application. Please feel free to ask questions while we go along. I'm monitoring the chat.
Is this a level, which application, which level?
Let's see, which level should we do? I think I will do a level 2. Most of you are probably level 1s, but just in case, I'll do a level 2. Level 3 has more questions than even the level 2, but we will avoid that for tonight for everyone's sake of time. So if you are a prior applicant, let's see. Oh, you know what? I had to click the bar at the bottom and I forgot and removed it. Hold on. So if that happens to you, you can do this. All right, let me try that again because I forgot. All right, when you click in as a prior applicant, this bar at the bottom of the screen is going to be there. If you accidentally, like I did, you exit it out, just log out, log back in, and it'll be there. Because otherwise the application is going to be completely blank. And we don't want that. We want your previous submission, your 2022 submission. And apparently I have multiple ones. So you will find the one that you have. You should only have one. And it'll show up like this. This is what I did last night, but you will find what you did last year. Click edit, and here we are. Now you can actually update your information. So let's pretend last year I was a new applicant. This year I am not a new applicant. You go through, you make sure all of your items, information are correct. We changed the physical location address. If you don't have a physical location, you have like a PO box or something like that, please do let us know. Anyways, a physical location like where you provide most of your services, most of your programming, where you meet most often, etc., and give it a short description at the bottom here. Again, please update your grant contact info. Please, this is a new box. Please let us know if you attended the briefing. Everyone here will be able to click that box. Everyone else should not. If you do not have an ED, CEO, etc., put NA under these required items. I know this was really confusing to a lot of people last year. I forgot to mention it. So this year I'm mentioning it for sure. Put NA if you do not have any of those positions. And then make sure you get this, your board chair president info. This should never be NA. You're required to have 3 board members by law. So you should always have at least one head of your board, whatever the title may be. Let's see. So someone asked, review the disclosure info. Do you mean the conflict of interest disclosure forms? Let's see. I'll roll here and I'll come back to the question if they clarify a little bit for me. Oh, and please make sure to check this box if you would prefer to get a digital version of the contract only. If you want just a physical version, leave it blank. Hit next. If you had any leadership changes, please make sure to update that. All their contact info, the way to the salutation. And if it's not one of these, feel free to put other and specify. Before I move on to the next page, I want to go over the navigation real quick. Blue circle is where you are. Gray circles you cannot go to. Once I move on to the next screen, this first one will turn black. And that means I can jump back to it. However, once you jump back, you are going to have to go one by one. You won't be able to skip forward. Okay, clarification on the question. What is the disclosure? Not the same thing as a COI form. So your conflict of interest form, well, your conflict of interest is a policy that includes a form, a disclosure form. So the conflict of interest policy tells your organization, all the people who interact with your organization, how your organization manages conflicts of interest. It's not a bad thing to have a conflict of interest, that's fine. You just need to handle it according to legal requirements by New York State to make sure that your organization is doing what's best for your organization, not necessarily any one person who is involved with your organization. The disclosure form then allows each person, each board member and key persons in your organization to disclose any conflicts that they may have. That way, whoever is collating them and managing the policy is aware of these issues and can address it before, well, the policy would tell you, if this person has a conflict, they're not to participate in deliberations. And that's how you know, because they disclosed it in your forms. So it's a
deliberations with regard to that topic.
Say again, Connie, I'm sorry.
So in deliberations with regard to that topic. So disclosure is where I might say, if I'm a board member, that my brother-in-law owns the building that the nonprofit is renting. That is a potential conflict according to New York State. So my opportunity to tell everyone that, so that I'm an open book and I'm transparent, is on the disclosure. So I'm disclosing that potential conflict. Even if it appears, even if there's a chance that there could be the perception of conflict, that's the place where I write it down. So if for some reason the board were to go into deliberation of whether or not they want to move, whether or not they want to ask for a reduction in rent and so on, that's when I would leave the room and not take part in those deliberations, or I would follow the procedure that's dictated on my conflict of interest statement. So anyway, to answer your question, all that are the blanks on the form where you fill in whether or not you have a conflict. And if you're not aware of any, that's also your opportunity to say none that I know of on your disclosure.
If you still have questions, just send them in the chat. Or you can contact me tomorrow through email or phone as well. So the other question we got in the paid staff demographic section should be consistent with the number of paid staff in the previous FY actual above. Does this mean that if a staff member identifies as both gender nonconforming and male or female, we need to only put them in one category? No. If they identify as nonconforming and male or female, you would put a 1 in each one, because each of those categories is represented by this person. So they should be consistent, but it's not going to be the same number necessarily. Because we acknowledge that. I, for example, identify as multiple races and Hispanic. So I, as a single person, would fill 4 categories or so, and that is fine. It is according, and there's people who don't want to disclose that information, and you can put that in none of the above, and just let us know. That's fine as well. I just don't want a completely off number. If you have 10 employees and you have 5 numbers, 5 categories, like 5 total in categories, well, maybe something's missing.
Or no employees, and all of a sudden there's 40 profiles in the employee section. But this year there is that blank box for you to fill in anything you feel like you need to add to clarify something that could potentially be misunderstood.
Okay, so the funding acknowledgement page looks a little different. This is a yes, no. If yes, great, give us your attachments. If no, explain how you will acknowledge funding according to your contract. And that's copy pasted out of the contract, so you know exactly what's required of you. And then attach your examples, just like that. Simple. And we do tell you, as usual, it's just one file only. It has to be a PDF. This is how you label it, assuming your organization is ABC. If you don't remember your acronym, it's a username to log in. And if you don't remember that either, just contact me. 5 megabyte limit for this file. And then how do you plan to address or have addressed the comments we have been sending you? Please put in your response. Again, you can work on it as you go along. as a prior applicant, it will not save each page as you go along anymore. You would have to go to the end of it and then save. So don't just leave the page. And I believe if I try to just, I think if I just, yeah, see, it won't jump me back. Let's see. Did it save anything? No, what? Ah, see, it didn't save at all. It put me back to a new applicant, and that's why it skipped. So if you are filling it in, you have to go all the way to the end, hit save at the end, and then it'll save it for you. See, I'll have to redo this. So let's say that last year you got that much, and I'm gonna leave this in here, and we're gonna do a level 2 to get right in the middle. Here is the one about prior funding use. Again, short, simple list of how the funding for the past year was used. These are examples. And this is examples of just like, you can expand on these is what I am trying to say. I've just put how, if you spent it on your marketing, what kind of marketing did you do? Did it help, how did it help your organization to have that extra funding for marketing? But then again, it's only 100 words. So we're not looking for a long essay, just a little insight on what the funding was actually used. And then what do you plan to use your 2023 funding for? And Connie talked about that one. That one you have 500 words, so you can put in a lot of info. And we copy pasted the not use right here, just in case. Well, use and not use. Your mission statement, again, we're asking how you measure impact and success. Pandemic effect summary, we would still like to know how you are still coping and coming ahead if you are. Financial info, here's the new question about the Charity 500. So if you have a date, you put it in. If there is no date, hit clear, and then it'll ask you why you're lacking it. If you have a surplus or a deficit, if you have neither, the next question disappears. And then information on all of these other items. And as you folks have seen it, it's more responsive than our fillable PDF from last year or year before that. So attachment B, no changes here. Attachment C, no changes. Oh, but I will let you know if you are updating, actually you should be updating your attachment C because it reflects a new year. Attachment B is a new report. So all of these, make sure to remove and update your new files. This one, same as last year, for some reason it never displays correctly. Just hit upload file, the words upload file, as I've written up here, and you should be able to upload it. Cash flow, I'm sorry, filing, tax filings, cash flow forecasts. And again, we tell you how to label them, the size limit. So if it won't upload, the first thing you should check is the size limit and the file type. You might have forgotten to save your worksheet as a PDF instead of as a Excel sheet. So make sure you change that. Again, we're asking for you to tell us where in your bylaws the information can be found. These are mostly copied. They're either best practice or they're literally from the nonprofit corporation law. But we noticed last night that the little help bubble was not working, so I copy pasted the help information into this viewer option. By review, as it says, we want to know when your organization last looked at your policies and your bylaws and decided, yes, this still serves my organization as we are. But if your organization has changed in some way, for example, gross receipts might necessitate an audit committee, or you got an executive director and before you didn't have one. So if your organization is growing and changing, you may need to update your bylaws. If your bylaws are from older than 2014, you may need to update your bylaws. So you would put the date your organization last looked at them to make sure they were good. And then the date of adoption would be the time the board actually had to vote and adopt a new version, an updated version.
The thing I like about that list is it's really your opportunity to conduct your own physicals. Each one of those items, we're inviting you to show us on what page can we find this topic in your bylaws. And it's going to alert you that maybe you don't have it, or maybe it's not clear before we even see it. And it gives you a chance to evaluate for yourself what it is we're evaluating.
Conflict of interest. And then this is the one for whistleblowers, same as last year. And then you would upload them here. Again, if you know your bylaws are good, I would suggest clicking on it and downloading it and taking a look just to make sure. I'm not necessarily going to do that here, but you can do that. Like I said, you can download your own files to look at. And then you can upload your new versions. Here we are on the board of directors information. No change here. Please remember that, like I mentioned, this one might trip you up. We're not just asking for the board members, but also key persons. So if you have a key person, and the definition for that is on the website under resources. I believe it was under, what was it? Officers, I believe. Or under related parties. It'll give you the definition of key persons, and you should have enough conflict of interest disclosure forms for all your board members and all of your key persons. The definition for independent directors can be found here. If you're basically, the only way you know if you have independent directors is because of the disclosure forms. So make sure that matches up. If they have, if have your board submitted disclosure forms with something listed on it, then you only have half of your board as independent directors.
That's also a question that's asked on the 990.
Mm-hmm. Yep. A lot of these questions are on the 990. We check your 990 against these. So
Yeah.
someone said, key persons such as staff.
Contradiction, that's a red flag.
Mm-hmm. So a key person might be staff, but I think Connie gave a great example yesterday about a founding member. Maybe they're technically not on the board anymore, but they still have power and authority in your organization.
Or influence.
Mm-hmm. So they would be a key person. Here we go. So yeah, if you click on that, it'll give you the definition of a key person, or I'm sorry, independent director, and it's right here. You know, controls or determines operating budget, manages substantial portion of activities, etc. And another question. You said you cannot save a page, but to go to the end of the pages to save your application, and then can go back and finish the other attachments and pages. Yes, so for example, if I am a grant applicant, I am done working on this for today. I don't have any more time to dedicate to it today. I will have to hit next all the way till the end. It is a level 2, so there's more questions than if it were. Oh, but here we are. You would hit preview, scroll down all the way, and hit save. Otherwise, it will not save. So make sure whatever
you have to get all the way, you have to get as far as you can before you can save it.
Yes. Yep.
Okay.
So right now, this kicked me back to the first page because I saved it, and it's like, okay, you're back here. Okay. So it is a little more navigating than we would like, but you don't have to enter all of them.
It's better every year.
But you don't have to enter all of your info again, and it does save, whatever changes you make up to that point. See, let me get back to board info. Presumably you are checking your information as you go along. Okay, here we are, back here. Okay, yes, so the question someone asked about male and female. Yes, if you have someone who is both identifies as female and gender nonconforming, you would put a 1 for both categories, even though it is only one person. And they don't identify as any of these, so you put that. And that is fine, so it'll look like 2 and 1, but what we want to know is what categories are or characteristics are represented. Here's the new section. This is an optional question, but it is encouraged. Tell us other stuff about your board diversity. For example, the organization that brought this to our attention more, because we were aware we didn't have all characteristics, but it was particularly important to them and how they operated that there is no space here for people of different abilities. So we have this space now because they're absolutely right. There are many ways to be diverse. So please do provide that information if you have it. Committees of the board and committees of the corporation. If you have multiple committees of the board, and add more as needed. You know what? I don't have the link here, but I will actually just write that down and do it tomorrow. Because if you're not sure what a committee of the board is or a committee of the corporation, let's see if this page will actually go already. Yep, it'll be under definitions and descriptions, committees of the board and committees of the corporation. In general, a committee of the board has power and is mostly limited to board members. A committee of the corporation has less power and usually can welcome persons out that are not part of the board, even not part of the organization per se.
The idea behind that law was to keep people from making decisions that the organization would then be bound to because they consider themselves a board member because they attend the meetings and they're very involved, but they're really not board members. So when you're forming a committee and you really want to bring in people from the community, it can't be a committee of the board. That really should be board members that are on those committees. You want to have an advisory group that makes recommendations to the board, doesn't make decisions, but recommendations. You could really take advantage of bringing in folks that are not on the board. And you can also test drive them to see if they could be great future board members. And I know most of you know that a lot of these items aren't new. They were a part of New York State's sweeping nonprofit revitalization act, intended actually to protect the nonprofit and in some ways to make it easier to govern. It probably doesn't feel that way sometimes, but these items aren't new. They've been in place for, I want to say, 8 years. It was revitalized a second time a couple of years after that, but they're not new items. So we're checking to make sure that everybody's paying attention and adhering to the laws of our state.
And if your bylaws still say standing committees and ad hoc committees, you need to update it and analyze what your committees do and whether they should be committees of the board or committees of the corporation. Okay, so you can list as many as are appropriate here. Your executive committee should never be a committee of the corporation. Just saying. And then we go into staff information. Again, no percentages, fractions, or decimals. Use whole numbers. In this question, please let us know the prior FY, actual, current budget, and your current FY today. And then here, this next one is only for your paid staff. and whether these people fall under a leadership position or a non-leadership position, and any additional information you'd like to provide right here. How your organization demonstrates alignment with diversity and inclusion. If you can, please tell us about these aspects of your organization, other aspects of your organization.
Mhm.
A lot tend to
There,
focus.
keyword there is demonstrates.
Mhm. A
You
lot of
don't need to
events,
tell us about your intentions.
yes.
I think we all have good intentions. You don't need to tell us about your intentions. Tell us how, through your actions, you are supporting this form of diversity,
Mhm.
social justice, and so on.
If you have a DEI, please share it with us. If you do not, we encourage you to look into that. Oh yes, and for this diversity and inclusion, a lot of organizations will focus on their audiences served, which is great, but it should come from the tippy top of your organization. Information on your strategic plan. Again, date of adoption, date of last review, same as with your governance documents. Dates covered by the plan. That means if you got a plan in 2020 and it goes through 2025, that's the dates covered by the plan. Don't mix them up with the date of review or adoption, and then you can attach your strategic plan there. Anyone who's level 1 here, you don't have to submit your strategic plan, but if you have one, we highly encourage you to submit it as attachment Z. Since this is a level 2, we're only asking for a list or summary of your services and programs. For level 3, there's a whole table to actually fill out with a lot more detail. And here's where we ask for specific examples of how you support racial justice, economic justice, and environmental justice. And we know that these are, I believe I said this last year when we did these are really big systemic issues, and you might feel like your organization isn't really affecting economic justice or isn't really affecting environmental justice. But in many ways you are. If you have recently done an adaptive reuse of an old building in a low-income minority or distressed community, you are doing environmental justice and economic justice.
Mhm.
It doesn't have to be think really about what your organization is doing. I saw a couple organizations that missed that they are in fact supporting these values at a level that is appropriate for an organization. So yeah.
Yeah, another great easy example is do you recycle?
Mhm.
Could be running a ballet organization, and you might say, well, what does that have to do with environmental justice? But take a hard look and see that you actually promote recycling within the organization, whether it's the playbill or whether it's, any paper or eliminating paper. I mean, you would be surprised if you stop and think about it. There are a lot of things you can fill in here. You don't have to be an environmental nonprofit to have something to say.
Again, these questions have not changed from last year, up to 500 words. Your population served, please provide us as much different information as you can, as well as differences with pre-pandemic conditions. And then more information, more specific information about your audiences.
So if your audience is hybrid, there's an opportunity for you to say that.
Let's see. Yep. So for level 3, there's a question in page 20 for you, but level 2 skips that and goes on to page 21. We showed you on the website that you can find all of the questions for your level if you want to do that. And this is the additional information section. So you can enter a paragraph up to 250 words. If there's significant changes, unexplained changes in your budgets or your leadership or whatever, please make sure to tell us about that. Or if there was something here that we didn't ask your organization, for example, for level 2, we didn't ask you about whether your organization is accredited by a different or evaluated by a different organization. You can tell us about that. That's great stuff. If this is not enough space, you can always do an attachment Z. And again, if you have a strategic plan, but you're a level 1 applicant, this would be the place to put it.
Mhm. It's a great place to put other things you're proud of.
Mhm.
You might have an annual report that you're proud of. You might have a news article that you're proud of, an award that you've received that you're proud of. So let attachment Z be your other opportunity to showcase what you'd really love the evaluators to see that you didn't have an opportunity to see because it wasn't technically an answer to one of the questions.
Okay, so because this is not a new applicant, this is where it will actually tell me that you are done and you want the application to be submitted and to go into review. So if you still need to go back and keep editing, just hit preview. Don't hit the box, but if you have done everything, you've double checked it 3 times, then you hit the box and then go into preview. Just know that once this gets into my inbox, it's almost instantaneous. I immediately go in to look at it and double check that everything's correct. So definitely don't hit it. Don't check the box until you're definitely ready for me to like get in there and start downloading stuff. So the preview, this was an option last year. Reminder that if you want a copy of your application, once you're done, right click and hit print. And then you can save your application as a PDF. And it will look something like that, except that, of course, I left a lot of stuff empty. But, and then, or you can find it in your computer's browser stuff. So one thing that we added this year is the edit button per section. So you don't have to go, let me hit save real quick. I recommend hitting save every time. Oh, and it actually jumped me back all the way to the front. So I do recommend going edit, save, edit, save. You're going to be going back and forth a lot, but you don't have to redo the whole thing.
Fortunately, you've got 7 weeks if you're level 1 and 8 weeks if you're level 2 or 3.
And that generally concludes the demo. I know it was fast. We may not have covered the level that you are planning to apply for, but they are significantly similar. There's just a lot more questions for level 2 and 3 than for 1. And you can find them all on these sheets right here under application, questions, lists, documents. Do we have any questions?
We've been at it an hour and a half now. You know, I thought of a point of clarification, but it probably does not apply to level 1 applicants. When we ask you to tell us about your programs, presentations, exhibits, what we really are interested in seeing are those programs, presentations, and exhibits where your nonprofit corporation is taking the risk. So you're risk taking every day. So you've planned this, you've reached out to your audiences, you're pulling the trigger, it's your event. If you're contacted by another nonprofit, and we love to see that, who doesn't love to see that? And you're partnering on an event where you're helping to publicize it by sending out an email or posting it to your social media to help this partner of yours, but you actually have no skin in the game whatsoever, no risk, then leave that off your list. That's not what we're looking for. And the reasons are obvious. This is a request for funding to help with your financial risks and your financial burdens and your financial operations. So those are the events and exhibits and presentations that we care about. Somewhere on one of these forms, it says, don't include fundraising events. And that's because it's not programmatic, it's a fundraising event. Don't include sponsored events. And I was a little worried that that could be misconstrued as an event that had a sponsor, as in a corporate sponsor. But it's still your event, and that was a real creative way to help fund it. So when we said sponsor, what we meant by that was when you lend a hand to another organization presenting an event and taking the risk, that's not the kind of thing we want to see on your list. So did you present it? Did you produce it? Did you have skin in the game? Was your organization at risk by offering this tremendous exhibit or presentation or production? Those are the things we want to hear about, because those are the things you're asking us to help you with. It also prevents us from seeing the same event show up on 4 different applications with a sense of ownership that it is an event that belonged to that organization when it really belonged to this other organization. And the collaboration was purely for marketing purposes. So try to stay out of those murky waters just to make your list look longer, because it doesn't help.
And if you have an event that happens regularly, like every Monday for many months, just say that it happens every Monday for this many months and your total audience or attendance for that. Don't try to list all of them, because it will jam up the application if you go too long. And it's also a lot more work for you. So I'm gonna put the last page of the PowerPoint, but I can go back into the website presentation portion if anyone would like. I'm not seeing any additional questions. We got 3 minutes till 8, so unless we start getting a bunch of questions, I'll wrap it up at 8. So if you have questions, please do send them in.
I think there's a spot on the application this year to indicate that you did attend the training.
This is it. You did it.
Yes, yes. It helps us to be able to assess whether or not the trainings are useful, whether or not we're communicating well. And if you didn't attend the training and there are a lot of misunderstandings throughout your application, it also helps us to connect the dots there as well. But we certainly like to see that you did make this investment of your evening, and we do appreciate that.
I think we were actually a little faster than yesterday's. So please let us know if we went too fast and you missed something, need us to go back over it.
I know. Well, I think there's more to explain to somebody who's never, thank you, Holly, somebody who's never applied before, right? There's more that we need to explain versus folks that have been through it. Many of the attendees tonight are veterans of the process. So it was really a matter of talking about what's different. Thank you for all you do, Marilee. I appreciate it.
Oh, thank you. I know it's supposed to be Mardi Gras today, and here we are.
But look at the calories we're not consuming.
Thank you, everyone. I see your messages. I think someone mentioned that they would have missed emphasizing some of their work without attending the briefing, so I'm glad that's helpful. I know this program is a little different from, or a lot different from most other grantors. And again, if anyone has any questions, feel free to email me or call me. I work 8:30 to 4:30 Monday through Friday. So if you call after hours, just leave a voicemail. If it's usually easier if you send an email,
Mhm.
much easier to get back to you right away, but still.
And again, now that you can, pace yourself. Now that you can,
Mhm.
start it. Make a list of the items that you're gonna need, and get back to it the next day or the following week. Pace yourself. Don't wait till the last week. It's not fair to you, and it's not fair to Art Services or Merrily. Or should I have said, it's not fair to your family? It's not your bartender? No, I'm kidding.
Okay. It's 8 o'clock. I think I'm not seeing any questions. I think we can probably close the session. I'll start recording. Thank you everyone for attending. Thank you for your questions and for applying every year and all the work that you do. Thank you, Connie.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye, everyone.